Hello again, everyone. Thank you for tuning in, and another big welcome to episode 2 of Questions Over Coffee. This is a technical podcast produced by Idwal, looking into some of the key technical and regulatory topics that currently press the industry. Another thank you to everyone who got in touch about episode 1, which came out last month and covered SIRE and our pre-SIRE inspections. If you missed it, you can catch it, of course, on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music, and iTunes. So this month, I am joined by Technical Manager Stephen Grist and Marine Surveyor Tomas Owen. Hello, gentlemen. Great to have you on the podcast.
Good
Thank you,
morning. Thank
Paul.
you, Paul.
So today we are chatting about all things MO32, and the guys will be answering some questions from our worldwide client base. So, like we did last time on episode 1, before we begin, it'd be great to get like a quick introduction from you both. First, about your seafaring background, and then about your work with Idwal. So, Stephen, I'll start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. My name's Stephen Grist. I'm a marine surveyor here at Idwal Marine. My experience before joining Idwal was with a major container shipping line as a deck officer. And latterly, towards the end of my seafaring career, I was exclusively working within Australia, New Zealand, and the Far East. And I work with the technical team, working closely with clients, particularly with the container shipping majors.
Cool. And yourself, Thomas?
Yeah. Good morning, Paul. So I'm a ex-seafarer. I used to work on the deck side of LPG gas carriers operating worldwide. I then came ashore and did a master's in maritime law, and I now work as a marine surveyor here at Idwal.
Amazing. Once again, it is great to have you both here. So we've got lots of questions to dive into today. So I'm going to dive straight in. And so to start with, just for those who are unfamiliar, what is MO32 and why is it significant for ship owners and operators?
So the Australian Maritime Safety Authority, otherwise known as AMSA, uses marine orders, MOs, to explain and implement the legal requirements for the maritime industry within Australia. Essentially, they allow international and domestic standards to be put into legal effect efficiently. Pertinently, for many stakeholders, you're required to comply with MOs if you operate a foreign flagged vessel, for example, making port within Australia.
Mm-hmm.
MOs contain detailed technical requirements and cover a wide range of matters relating to safety, technical standards, protection of the marine environment, as well as ultimately labour requirements. For the purposes of this podcast, however, we will be focusing on MO32 and its amendment, which came into effect last year on the 1st of January.
Okay.
MO32 sets out the requirements and responsibilities for items such as loading and unloading operations, inspection, testing and maintenance of machinery, as well as equipment used for loading and unloading the vessel, as well as safe working load management. The operators of all vessels loading and discharging cargo in Australia, they ultimately need to comply with the requirements of MO32.
Amazing. Thanks, Thomas. So from my corner, I suppose, leading on from sort of like what is MO32, obviously what vessels does it apply to? And Stephen, if you could answer this, how does it differ from other safety regulations?
Well, interestingly, Paul, when a ship is in an Australian port, the ship's crew cannot be employed in handling cargo in connection with the loading and unloading of a ship if sufficient labour is available. Even if crew are permitted to undertake cargo operations, they are only permitted if operations are conducted in compliance with the requirements of MO32. MO32 therefore imposes a significant obligation on the master of vessel to ensure specific requirements relating to safety of cargo handling equipment and cargo operations on ships are met. In many instances, the requirements go further and are more specific than existing international regulations, such as SOLAS, for instance. MO32 gives effect to parts of the International Labour Organization codes and instruments that relate to machinery, appliances, and equipment used for loading or unloading vessels. MO32 also applies alongside domestic work health and safety regulations within Australia. Essentially, MO32 imposes specific requirements on vessels carrying out cargo operations within Australian ports, and these regulations in many instances are in addition to international provisions that managers, ship and equipment designers and crew tend to be more familiar with. A good way to think of MO32 in a practical sense is when a ship is alongside in Australia and intends to work cargo, that ship essentially becomes an extension to the quayside and shore facility. That means that vessels are subject to the strict occupational work health and safety requirements imposed within Australia. MO32 applies to all vessels loading or unloading cargo in Australia, whether they are Australian or foreign, and also to foreign vessels that are offshore industry mobile units operating in Australian waters, such as oil rigs, for instance.
Yep.
At Idwal, we see the most challenges relating to MO32 compliance for vessels with significant stevedoring requirements during cargo operations. For example, container vessels as well as bulk carriers, particularly if they are required to use their own gear for cargo operations within Australia.
Thank you, Stephen. So lots of information there, and that does shed a really clear light on MO32. So, both you were at the forefront, of Idwal operations, along with our Marine Surveyor network and our ops team, from our global inspection experience. And for our listeners who may not be aware, this may be the first time you're hearing about Idwal. We conduct upwards of 4,000 physical vessel inspections a year, and our data analytics are based on a data set of over 14,000 vessels. So, from that experience, how can MO32 related deficiencies impact commercial opportunities?
So here at Idwal, we do receive a lot of queries relating to MO32 compliance from owners, charterers, as well as managers. So the primary risk of MO32 compliance is ultimately safety. It's important to raise before looking at commercial matters that despite improvements, we still see stubborn, global, poor safety performance, which, if without improvement, still leaves margin for personal injuries as well as unfortunate fatalities to both stevedores as well as crew on board. Owners and charterers are very much exposed to claims, sometimes serious due to work-related accidents, with prevalent causes for such claims, including falls from height during cargo operations. The financial costs of these work stoppages, delays, or even port rejection can be significant for owners, charterers, as well as managers. A charter arrangement could ultimately break down altogether if a vessel experiences persistent or significant MO32 compliance issues. The impact on a vessel's earning potential as well as employability is therefore significant and has an impact ultimately on the asset's value as well.
Okay, thank you. And there it really hammers the point home. The stakes could not be higher to our clients and listeners that are operating in Australian, or will be, sorry, operating in Australian waters. So one of the questions that we saw, probably most often is, does non-compliance with MO32 carry risks beyond safety and further into commercial opportunities?
Yes, you're quite correct there, Paul. So MO32 does actually contain provisions for penalties. So these include fines, and if an inspector considers the loading or unloading operation to be unsafe, they can actually issue a written direction to prohibit the operation, even if other provisions of MO32 are actually met. There have been incidents whereby vessels have even had to depart Australia without being able to discharge cargo, for instance. So where a vessel is non-compliant with the mandatory provisions of MO32, it is not permitted to work the vessel, and AMSA may consider to issue a notice of non-compliance. The managers may apply to AMSA for a one-off or ongoing exemption in respect of any item which will be considered by AMSA on a case-by-case basis. However, from our experience here at Idwal, AMSA are typically reluctant to grant such exemptions in these cases.
Okay.
So, but where instances where a ship is non-compliant with a recommendatory provision of MO32, this will not amount to a formal non-compliance under MO32, and AMSA will not issue a notice of non-compliance. Here, instead, becomes an issue of the compliance with the local state-based work health and safety laws. So if the inspector determines that the situation is unsafe, then work will not take place. However, the parties are ultimately free to conduct their own risk assessment and agree on and implement an alternative safe working arrangement that meets the local requirements and work health and safety laws.
Yes, and if I might just point out here, Thomas, and it's important to note that MO32 requirements are not only audited during port state control inspections by AMSA. It's very common for vessel access and working areas to be thoroughly inspected by health and safety representatives from a shore-based facility before and during every cargo operation within Australia. Furthermore, stevedores are empowered to report non-compliance items during inspections, and we have seen instances whereby vessels have been detained by PSC as a result of a report of an unsafe condition from stevedores during routine cargo operations.
Amazing. Thank you both. So, as I alluded to earlier, and as you introduced, you are on the front line. Idwal's technical team, go through dozens of reports every day, ensuring that they are ready for clients. So, alongside our Marine Surveyor network, in your experience, what are the most common challenges ship owners face in meeting MO32 requirements?
So most MO32 non-compliances relate to three main areas, and these are design, condition and maintenance, and training and understanding. So MO32 sets out safety requirements for the design and construction of vessels with a specific focus on cargo handling equipment, hatchways, and means of access. Ships and equipment such as cargo handling cranes are not necessarily designed with MO32 requirements in mind. MO32 contains specific design feature requirements, including measurements for means of access fittings, cargo handling equipment, and hatchways and covers. Design features are particularly problematic for owners and managers, as they often require modifications of arrangements which can be expensive, time-consuming, and might be outside the remit of the onboard crew to complete. Existing container vessels, for instance, may need retrofits or modifications in cargo working areas to ensure MO32 compliance. However, such retrofits and modifications need time and often need to be arranged alongside conventional CapEx planning cycles. Having third-party specialist support can really aid identification of non-compliance, so that cost-effective and timely modifications can be conducted. Under MO32, cargo handling equipment, condition and maintenance of equipment, and ship structures are critical for ensuring safety during cargo handling operations. Cargo working areas, such as cross-deck working areas, lasting bridges, and platforms, are often subject to high wear and tear from cargo operations, as many of the listeners will be aware. Furthermore, a key feature of MO32 compliance is the level of understanding of the applicable requirements by the technical management and crew. So further familiarization with applicable requirements is often necessary so that the crew can identify non-compliant items early to avoid issues arising during routine stevedore safety inspections in Australia. A culture of identifying non-compliant items and reporting, documenting and repairing non-compliant items needs to be instilled amongst crew on vessels transiting Australian ports. Moreover, shore-based managers need to ensure crew are properly informed and resourced to deal with the enhanced scrutiny of a vessel, which is to be expected at ports within Australia.
Thanks, Stephen. So, a lot of different factors there, and, not just for the manager, for the owner, but like you said, for the crew as well. And I can imagine this process from my side, from a non-seafarer or technical mind, is can be quite complex. So you alluded to crew there. How should owners and managers approach crew training and on board procedures to remain compliant with MO32?
So here at Idwal, we would advocate a proactive and structured approach to ensuring consistent compliance and positive performance in respect of MO32. So the basic principles of ensuring cargo handling equipment as well as safety during stevedoring operations, it's a worthwhile and important endeavor for any diligent manager or owner. Aligning MO32 requirements with shipboard management systems, the SMS, and existing international safety management, the ISM processes, is therefore a core driver in ensuring fleet-wide positive performance. Having easy to understand and documented safety procedures, procedures for routine maintenance on equipment and working area checks, and pre-operation inspection templates to aid identification and reporting of non-compliant items, these are critical to ensure systematic fleet-wide compliance.
Thanks, Thomas. So following on directly from that, what specific areas of focus of equipment maintenance and inspections are highlighted by MO32?
Well, as we've already touched upon, MO32 places critical emphasis on the safety, maintenance, and certification of cargo handling gear, and this is to protect both seafarers and stevedores during cargo operations. The main areas that impact technical managers relate to working area safety. So this is particularly relevant on container vessels. So take, for example, a cross-deck working area raised above a hold and constructed with gratings for safe passage. There are a significant number of risk factors for such an arrangement, particularly given the heavy wear and tear such areas are subject to during day-to-day operations. However, MO32 also includes technical requirements related to cargo handling equipment, including the thorough examination of lifting appliances and the respective loose gear, wires, and hooks.
Okay, and sorry to follow on that straight away again. So what recurring MO32 related deficiencies are identified during Idwal inspections, and I suppose why do these often go unnoticed by owners or managers?
So here at Idwal, we do typically find the most common reoccurring deficiencies in this respect relate to the condition of cargo working areas on container ships, with particular issues relating to fencing and fall protection around the working areas, as my colleague just explained earlier. Often we see significant maintenance backlogs in respect of these areas. We also see a lot of issues whereby the crew have identified faults, but have deferred repairs due to schedule pressures, which create safety and compliance risks, particularly when trading in Australia. Fencing around cargo working areas is a particular issue that we see frequently in our MO32 inspections. As per MO32, any cargo space where there is a risk of a person falling a distance of at least 2 meters must be fenced. The fencing must consist of at least 2 parallel rails, ropes, or even chains, and fencing must be continuous. Of course, fencing around the cargo holds is subject to heavy wear and tear, and we frequently see fencing arrangements that do not meet the exact technical standards outlined in the MO32 provisions. Where safety stanchions are used, we often see that the stanchions and sockets are actually damaged. We sometimes even find that there is actually an inadequate quantity of stanchions to safely secure working areas in line with the requirements.
Yes, and we also see particular issues with vessels required to use their own gear in Australian ports. So from our experience, loose gear such as slings, shackles, and spreaders often receive less maintenance attention than fixed lifting appliances.
Mm-hmm.
Inadequate record keeping, including missing or undoubted testing certificates and incomplete gear registers and inspection logs, are also frequent issues that we see. We commonly observe issues whereby managers and crew have assumed that shore-based inspections are sufficient to ensure MO32 compliance. And it's important to implement procedures for diligent pre-use checks and in-service routine maintenance, inspections, and recording in line with any maker's recommendations.
Thank you both. Some really, really important information there. And, obviously those themes of safety can be seen throughout, with obviously the welfare of the crew at the heart of all of this. So, for ship managers, for ship owners, what proactive steps can they take to ensure ongoing compliance and readiness for inspection under the MO32 regulation?
So it's really about having a systematic, structured and fleet-wide system to ensure compliance. So incorporating MO32 items into an effective planned maintenance system is vital, and of course auditing vessels regularly to ensure work orders are being diligently completed as required is critical for positive performance. A systematic approach for compliance, for example, can include incorporating a color-coded tagging system to track gear inspections and including cargo gear checks in arrival and departure checks.
Yes, and if I may just add here as well, sort of crew and managers, they need to be sufficiently trained and resourced to recognize early signs of gear fatigue as well as damage, so that issues can be resolved long before cargo operations actually commence in port. And as my colleague Stephen has already touched upon, having simple, succinct and targeted procedures, systems and templates to guide crew through MO32 and AMSA preparation, it's very important to ensure consistent positive performance.
Thank you. Thank you. That is some really good points there for our listeners. And another question that we saw quite often, when we reached out to customers and friends of the company is how can owners better prepare their crew to meet MO32 requirements? So that's practically and not just on paper.
So that's a very interesting question, Paul. So meeting MO32 requirements and wider industry regulations on paper is certainly one thing, but operational readiness and real-world crew competence is what really keeps people safe and vessels trading efficiently. So any strategies to prepare crew and vessels for compliance, they need to be practical. We believe and experience shows robust hands-on training with crew is very beneficial, ensuring that all crew get the exposure and experience they need. Regular inspections and audits whereby client compliance items are verified are also very beneficial and can be used as somewhat of a dry run before an actual port state control or stevedore inspection, particularly if the vessel and crew have not traded within Australia ports for some time. The creation and use of checklists and visual aids can also be beneficial. Photographs of gear or area defects can also be beneficial in terms of inspection checklists created.
Amazing. And of course, looping all of what we've talked about today around, we have to ask is how can we, Idwal, help with MO32 compliance?
So at Idwal, we've been assisting clients with MO32 compliance for several years now, and within that time, we've built up significant experience and expertise in the sector. Our MO32 inspections help clients ensure compliance with Australian requirements long before their arrival into port. Our comprehensive assessment provides a tool for the vessel to meet MO32 requirements, preventing potential delays, detentions, or penalties at Australian ports. Only via inspection and, we believe, a boots on the ground approach can it be verified that all cargo handling equipment, access ways, and safety systems meet the specific requirements required for safe stevedoring operations. We also work with onboard and shore-based teams to manage and mitigate the obvious compliance risks. We can provide owners, managers, and charterers with a complete MO32 checklist with supporting photographic evidence of any compliance issues that have been identified. We have experienced surveyors at hub ports around the globe, so we can assist clients anywhere in the world, not just in Australia. And our inspection reports are accurate, detailed, and comprehensive, ensuring that our clients get the insight that they need on the issues that they face.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Stephen. And I do believe I have now got to the bottom of my list. So a huge thank you to you both for joining me today. I found it very useful, and I hope you, the listener, have as well. This podcast, as mentioned earlier, will be available on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music, iTunes, as well as our LinkedIn page and website. If you have any questions about MO32, or if you require assistance for your business or have any questions about the content of today's podcast, please do not hesitate to get in touch through our website, our social media, or by contacting us directly at inquiries at idwalmarine.com. Next episode will be out towards the end of May, and we will have new guests from the Idwal technical team on to talk about dry bulk pre-vetting. But for now, thanks again for joining, and we will catch you next time. Goodbye.